Good morning, boys and girls. Today I have an announcement before we get to the introductory book for today. And the announcement is that we're on Spotify. And Matrix of Mind is on Spotify, and you can look it up. I'm not sure if you use my name or you do Matrix of Mind or how exactly, but you can figure it out. We'll put a link to underneath the video. And so if you want to start on YouTube and finish on Spotify, that'd be great. And so for those of you that are just listening, which I don't recommend entirely because there's hand gestures and things like that to try and demonstrate, mirror awareness and things like that. But it's there if you want to use it. And that's very nice, I think. Okay. Today's book is this classic, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This is a book that's used, I think, in the original Tibetan. I think they use it actually for Tibetan Buddhists in Tibet. I'm not sure. Probably. I was introduced to this book by the Dalai Lama, and he spent, 5 days or something like that on one chapter in this book called Patience. And I really recommend it because these paramitas, or little virtues, or little boats that get you from one side of the river to another, they're really very, very useful no matter what you're doing, even if you're not doing Dharma. And the one on patience is very cogent, and it's a good intro. And maybe I should just read a little bit of it. So the chapters are like this: the benefits of an awakening mind, disclosure of evil, conscientiousness, guarding alertness, patience, enthusiasm, meditation, wisdom, which is also sometimes known as insight, and dedication. So this is a good one, and a classic. Let me see. Let's just go to the patience one real quick. Page 60. Whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas and generosity, that have been amassed over 1,000 eons, will all be destroyed in one moment of anger. There is no evil like hatred, no fortitude like patience. Thus I should strive in various ways to meditate on patience. My mind will not experience peace if it fosters painful thoughts of hatred. I shall find no joy or happiness. Unable to sleep, I shall feel unsettled. And so this fits right in with that the Buddhist aphorism that, getting angry at somebody is like poking yourself in the eye. And it really is. And you although it's not uncommon, it seems it's not uncommon, I'll say. I was going to say it's less common now, but it's just as common. It's a very destructive emotion, anger. And so what they mean by patience here is not just waiting, obviously, but they mean forbearance and refraining from getting angry. That's a real poison, anger. And if you need any help in understanding that, there's plenty of books, and certainly almost every Buddhist text talks about the destructive impact of anger or hatred on the person who has it. And you could just look at social media and you can see the overwhelming evidence of that. So this is A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This was first published in 1979 in English. And it's by Shantideva, who's like a big dog in Buddhism, an 8th century Buddhist master at the monastic University of Nalanda in northern India. And the Dalai Lama is the one who really promotes this, and I recommend it. He uses this stuff all the time. Okay.
Who is it translated by?
Oh, that's a good question. Stephen Batchelor. And Stephen Batchelor, okay, so it's both in the Sanskrit and the Tibetan. Stephen Batchelor is a solid guy. I haven't read, I think that's all he does is translate. I don't think I've read any books by him. But he's quite solid. He worked with the Dalai Lama for years. And then the Dalai Lama, of course, has his own translators, who I remember as young kids, and now they're old men. So, Stephen Batchelor is the translator.
Okay. So there's another one on the same name.
Just 1 second. Oh, I've got a sound problem here. Give me a moment.
Battery 100%. Connected to David's iPad.
Say something.
There's
I'm sorry, it's going to take 1 moment. I just have to get this wired up properly.
David's iPad disconnected. Connect.
All right, now try it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you. All right, go ahead. What were you going to say?
There's a few different versions.
Oh, interesting.
On Amazon. There's at least 3. One seems translated by Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche.
Yeah, that'd probably be good too. Maybe with the commentary, more commentary. This doesn't have particularly have much commentary to it.
One with Stephen Batchelor, but it's used. And one by Vesna and Alan Wallace.
Oh, Alan Wallace is solid too. Love that guy. Yeah, so those are all solid translations, which is very important in this work. Very important to know who's translating and from what, and when it was written and for whom.
The Wallace one is 1997.
Yeah, that's later. But
The
Shantideva is
Rinpoche
a big guy in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism.
And the newest one is 2018 by something Rinpoche.
Yeah, you'd have to check those. It may be that this one's out of print or something. I hope not. I doubt it. Shantideva is pretty popular. Okay, what have you learned recently?
A few things. One thing that I've been on my mind that I've noticed is that when things in my life are more difficult, then I tend to pay more attention to Dharma, or have more, it's like a kick in the butt, or more, it feels more pressing.
Good. Yeah, in times of stress, or times of pain, or times of all kinds of things, if you develop a habit, then you turn to Dharma, and it's always there for you, always there, and it helps. There's no question. I'll speak as an ex-psychiatrist. It helps more, if I do say so, with normal neurotic people, not psychotics or schizophrenics or true bipolar or anything like that, but normal neurotic people, and normal people are neurotic. It helps more than psychotherapy, I would say, and it lasts longer. As a generalization, now I'm not saying anything against psychotherapy. I'm just saying that the two together would probably be the best thing, and I think that's happening more and more. Yeah, being mindful of your mind, which is kind of what psychotherapy should be. So you turn to it when things are stressful. Good.
But then on the converse, I've noticed when things are, when things in my life are going really well, then I turn to it less, or it feels less. It feels like it's less pressing.
Not good. Not so good, because in both circumstances you see different things. And also you want to build up momentum. It's like anything else. Once you build up the momentum, then everything's much, much easier. And by the way, let me stop for a second. And I should have made another announcement, and that is, I really want to recommend the readings that we have of the Avatamsaka on YouTube, of this book, which I'm always talking about, the Flower Ornament Scripture, or the Avatamsaka Sutra. The readings are very good, and now the first time or the second time you hear it, it'll be very jarring, and you'll go, "What is this? Like, this doesn't make sense. It's kind of it seems repetitious, but it's not in the short term anyway." And it's jarring to our ears. But by the time you get to the third listening or something like that, then your mind and it click, and then you find that it's very soothing and very educational, and you can see how it's laying a foundation, and it's also very astute, right? And so there's a reason it's been around since the 1st and 2nd centuries, but it's still very good for the modern mind in its current translation from the late 20th century. So I really want to recommend that again to folks. No matter what you're doing, you have to have a certain lightness of mind. You can't be all rigid. You can't be all obsessed. You can't be all this or that. You kind of have to let your mind go and go with it. Like there'll be a sea of diamonds. So that's hard at first to imagine, or the light or sapphire light with exquisite scent. And these things at first don't make any sense in a way, but then gradually your brain gets used to it. And then you can visualize a sea of diamonds or a sea of lotus flowers or clouds of jewels or other beautiful things. So give it a chance, that's what I'm saying. Give your brain a chance. Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Now the best is to get the text and to read it yourself at your pace. But failing that, or in addition to that, if you ever want to calm down or you want to before you go to bed, it's a very nice thing to do your brain before you go to bed. But you got to go with it. It's like the Sufi text in that regard. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess I was going to say there's, on the topic of like practicing less when things are going well, there's the main thing that I find is helpful is just like the habits that I have of.
Very much so.
But aside
if it becomes a habit, you'll miss it in the mornings. You'll miss it. And you'll look forward to it too. It's like runners or workout freaks.
But then sometimes, so that's, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's, I guess once it's a habit, it's easy, but then it can be disrupted if like you have to travel or something like that, and then habits are hard.
But there's ways to adapt. There's for traveling, it's hard to travel with a book that's 2.5 inches thick. But there are thin, small little books that are made for traveling, by Idris Shah. Or there's things you could do online, or there are things you have to be creative too. And don't underestimate what you can do on a plane, or what you could do as you're waiting for a plane, as you're getting a ticket and standing in line and boarding and then sitting there for God knows how long. And, talk about needing patience. That could come in very handy. And so like a muscle, see, the thing about these virtues, the 6 paramitas, is that unlike other mental facets, they can be cultivated just like muscles. And so you can get stronger and stronger and stronger, then you just have a better life. You have a certain amount of discipline, you have a certain amount of insight, you have a certain amount of patience, and these get stronger. And it's just a better life.
Related to the 6 paramitas, the one that's one of them is generosity.
Yes.
So I have a question on that. So, I mean, there's different ways you can practice generosity. And like traditionally one is charity, right?
Yeah, Americans go directly to money, right?
Right.
You give money and that's generosity, but that's not particularly what's meant.
Because I was gonna say, like, it seems, at least where I am, like, from the charities I see, they're all just like, I mean, they just feel like they're not that distinguishable from corporations.
They're not. There's been a whole degeneration of nonprofits
And
in the West, and they've been used, unfortunately, for all kinds of not so benevolent, sometimes nefarious ends. I mean, we have nonprofits in other countries that are trying to undermine the government, for example. So, yeah, you can't rely on that. And with philanthropy, if you're going to give money, you have to be very careful that you're not just giving it to the most powerful gang, in the Congo or wherever it may be, right? Because a lot of that money gets stolen. The majority of it does.
Right. And so
It's called giving a ladder to a thief. You don't want to give a ladder to a thief.
Right. So I see that, and then in response to that, I just go, okay, well, I'm not gonna donate any money to these organizations, but then I feel like I'm being stingy.
Well, there's other things you can do, and generosity is generosity of spirit, being charitable towards people, which doesn't mean necessarily giving them money. I mean, it could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It doesn't mean donating forgive me, but it doesn't necessarily mean donating to the pastor or to the mega church. It doesn't mean just thoughtlessly handing out money to nonprofits or supposedly philanthropic organizations. Being charitable to people in general, like you may have political enemies, right? Or people you think are your enemy. But to be charitable with them and to be patient and to try and understand may require some effort, and we just hit like 4 Paramitas. But think how much better that is all the way around for you, for them, for the world. So it's generosity of spirit. It's charity towards others, in the old sense of the word charity. It's been perverted in the U.S. Unfortunately, the word charity and generosity.
Right. You
help a brother out.
What's that?
Help a brother out. It's not necessarily giving them money. You could be harming them with money. If you go to one of the places I saw the most true charity, I think, was at the Salvation Army. And it wasn't necessarily the people that were donating to the Salvation Army, although there was some of that too, but it was the people that were working there. And you'll also see it in 12-step programs where it's almost institutionalized, that you give people the benefit of the doubt and you give them a chance. Right?
In what way did you see it in the people working at the Salvation Army?
Their orientation was that of giving. And in so doing, they received what they needed. I'm talking about people who were down and out, and they needed, something after they got out of prison or whatever else. And at the Salvation Army, I noticed that they felt fulfilled. They were doing something meaningful, something important, something tangible, something that was charitable towards others, which after all are yourself, right? And so it works out perfectly. Eventually you understand that the other is yourself. Like Jesus said, what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Right? He's very clear about that. He also said, treat your neighbor as yourself. That's pretty clear too, at this level of understanding. So these virtues are not necessarily mealy-mouthed, religious prescriptions. You're not trying to be Pollyanna. You're trying to be a grown man or a grown woman and to live a full life that doesn't have unnecessary suffering in it. And these are the virtues and they're frankly not that different than the virtues of, say, the Roman civilization. Did you see that tweet where I listed all those virtues?
I saw it, but I didn't fully read it.
The one thing that they add, I think that's notable, there may be other things, is courage.
Mm.
And who was it? Was it C.S. Lewis, or it could have been somebody else of that epoch, said that courage underlies all of the virtues, especially when they're being tested. That it requires courage to, which is a way of stating it. It takes courage to do some of the things that the other paramitas require. Sometimes forbearance takes courage. Empathy can take courage. Generosity can take courage. And so they don't explicitly spell that out in the Buddhist canon, but I think they do in the Sufi traditions, and Jesus exemplified courage in the Christian tradition, as did I think David, or David, the father of Solomon.
Mm.
Is that right?
How does it differ from perseverance?
Courage?
Yeah.
Well, it takes courage in the beginning, and then you have to keep at it. That's what I would say right off the bat. Give me an example.
If we take Jesus as an example.
Well, his perseverance was pure courage. Yeah, I suppose if you're going to get crucified, you keep going. Yeah, that's an example. But for most of us, perseverance, I think, requires more discipline and effort. Two other paramitas.
Mm-hmm.
Useful stuff, and it's very interesting as a psychiatrist, and I had a lifetime of doing that. You find that the things that truly help somebody are the things that truly help everybody. And courage is required sometimes, as is perseverance, effort, discipline, generosity of spirit towards others and yourself. Nobody benefits if you just beat yourself up. But some people enjoy beating themselves up, and they just go in a vicious circle.
Right.
But usually underneath beating themselves up, there's blame of somebody else. But anyway, there's blame there. And the Dalai Lama said something once, I've never forgotten. He said, once you begin to blame, there's no end to the blame. And it's true that if you follow blame all the way out, it always comes back to you. Just an observation. If you truly follow it all the way. Yeah, so these things aren't as glamorous as meditation and tantra and mantra and all this, and these beautiful sutras, etc. But they're core to living a good life. And the book I mentioned last time, this book by Hadran Ali, who's really the Shia champion, I would say. But I think he's appreciated by both Sunnis and Shias, despite the historical problems. This book has all of those kinds of things in there, and nicely worded too.
Well, one thing I noticed is that the meditation becomes a lot easier the more I practice the paramitas.
Absolutely. And meditation is one of the paramitas.
Right.
There's a lot of misunderstanding of this too. There are people who suffer with their minds, and the core deficit is that they've never stopped to meditate, to even examine their minds. They don't have any distance from their thoughts. They're identified with the thoughts so closely, and they resist meditation because they think it's going to be awful, or they tried it once for 30 seconds and it didn't work. And that's just a recipe for failure. There's a certain minimum amount of meditation, classical meditation, that's required in the beginning for this work. Later you'll do it because you want to, but in the beginning it's required. And what was I going to say about that? Later, it may or may not be the central part of your practice. You know, so maybe you're listening to sutra or reading sutra. Maybe you're studying, aphorisms from the ages. Maybe you're studying, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or reading the Bible or something. But without contemplation, which is another word for meditation, and that's what I wanted to say, is that in the U.S., especially historically, I'm talking latter half of the 20th century, first parts of the 21st, people assume meditation is sitting there on a cushion or something and closing your eyes and blanket everything out. No, that's only one kind of meditation. Contemplation is just as important, and later, once you've gotten meditation under your belt, it becomes the most important thing, right? Because you have to have insight. Meditation without insight is just relaxation therapy. Insight without meditation, at least in the beginning, is just the journey of 1,000 miles, but you're headed in the wrong direction. So I can think of a few people that suffer a lot because they're unwilling to do this basic, that's what everybody says these days. I have ADHD. Everybody's got ADHD. It's not easy. There's a little bit of hyperbole there, but not much. In med school, I'd say half the students had ADHD.
Like clinically diagnosed?
No, not clinical. Clinical, it's actually a true case of ADHD. I'm a child psychiatrist, or I was one, right? True ADHD is a different animal altogether. It's like autism. And what's happened is that it's called diagnostic inflation, right? Overgeneralization, or diagnostic creep is the technical phrase, I think. And so there was a time when there was 1 out of 1,000 kids was autistic. And of those, quite a few were institutionalized. And with ADHD, it may have been 2 out of 100. And those kids, they're not like other kids. They come into your office, they tear it apart. I mean, literally, you can't even see them in your office because they'll tear it apart while you're there talking to the mother. So really, ADHD is something totally different. And the treatment, of course, is the same as people who are having difficulty concentrating or whatever. But now every other person's either ADHD or autistic or something. So that's unfortunate. And then that'll have to swing back, right? These days, people want to be autistic because they want to be like Elon. Elon's not autistic. I don't care what he says. He's just smart. Smart people can appear autistic. And ADHD too.
What's that?
And they can appear ADHD.
Right.
And they can look like they're spacing, but have you ever seen Elon when somebody asks him a question, a more difficult one, and he stops and he looks away, and you could tell he's just thinking. In a little kid, you would say, well, he's spaced out. But in fact, the kid's just thinking.
Right.
So we have a lot of problems with psychiatric diagnoses in the West. And we're way too liberal with medications, in my opinion, or compared to Europeans or anyone else in the world. So it's not a legitimate excuse, the fact that you have ADHD. That doesn't mean you can't meditate. Right. It's just you have to work at it a little bit more.
On that topic, you said in the past how therapy through therapists can often do more harm than good.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that too much. Well, maybe I should. I was thinking there's a lot of therapists, or a few therapists, that watch this. But let me say that, yes. What happens is the therapist has been trained in a certain way. They've been trained to look for something, and then they see it, whether it may be there or not, but they see it because that's what they've trained to recognize. And that's one way that things get imparted to patients. Or another one is thought suggestion. A trauma specialist is going to find trauma. And everybody's got trauma. There's no way to get through this life without trauma. I don't care who you are. But the idea that it's pathological and it must be pathogenic, it must cause symptoms, it must be treated by working through it again and going back and doing whatever they might do. That's maybe if you want to keep someone in therapy for the rest of their life or something, or maybe if you want to, build an industry around that. But true PTSD is actually fairly uncommon unless you're talking about soldiers or firefighters or policemen or something like that. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm saying that it's overdiagnosed and people reify it. Do you know what reify means? Look it up. Look it up for everybody else, because other people might not know it. It's a good word. Reify.
How do you spell it?
Oh boy. R-E.
Reify. Make something abstract more concrete or real.
Yeah. Make something real. And so therapists have a lot of power because they can diagnose. And if you diagnose, that tends to reify whatever it might be. And then that can cause problems too. So therapists need to be aware of this. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anytime you have, like my father used to say, if you go to Midas, you're going to get a muffler.
Right.
I wonder if people know what Midas is. They still have Midases?
I have an association to car mechanic.
I have an electric car. I haven't. Yeah, it's a muffler. It's a muffler shop.
Okay.
If you get an electric car, you don't have any of that stuff to worry about anymore. Okay, good. What else is on your mind? Or what other questions?
Let me see. I wanted to just say one thing. In a previous video, you said that you don't know what people use Reddit for and that you should avoid it. I find it, I just wanted to counterpoint you on that I find it useful for finding like product reviews and reviews of things where real people commenting on it.
That's good to know.
But I don't think
that makes sense. I'm sorry?
I don't think that's going to last because you're starting to see bots pretend to be real people.
Oh yeah, there's a problem.
There's
well, that's good. That's good. So I learned something. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Where like Twitter is trying to be a place where you can find real people's opinion on things. Mm-hmm. They still have the bot problem, but the issue with Twitter is that you can't. It's not very well indexed. So you can't search things. You can only know about current discussions on things. Really,
have you tried searching it?
Yeah, it's crap.
Okay, I've had a different experience searching, and I can find some really esoteric stuff too. Mm-hmm. So it's gotten better. I mean, the whole structure of it, I think, has improved. And have you asked Grok to do an image of you?
No.
Are you on your phone?
Well, I have it here, yeah.
Ask Grok to draw an image of me. By me being you, right? Just for fun.
Yeah. I've done it.
Okay, well, there you go. That's hilarious. Folks, just if you want a kick, just ask Grok to do an image of you. And he'll take your posts on X, formerly known as Twitter, and from that it'll extract what it thinks you look like. But it got your age right. It got your gender right.
Yeah.
You've got glasses, so I guess that means you're smart.
Yeah.
That's very funny. Okay, back to work.
What did you get?
I got this guy in the mountains, dressed in a white clothes, staring off into the distance like he's, that was it. It wasn't like it was a whole body thing with mountains and a valley, and it just very Taoist, actually. I felt pretty good about that.
Hmm.
And it got my age, my hair color and all that.
I played around with seeing how well the AIs could infer information on you just giving an email.
Interesting.
And it can infer more than you think.
Yeah, I know it's gonna get scary for folks. But let's get back to Dharma, because
Mhm.
otherwise, I mean, I love it to talk about AI, but it's not an AI channel. People could get that elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
And they should, frankly. People need to be aware of what's happening. Here we go. I'm going to go right down that rabbit hole. No. Okay, let's do something else.
I'm reading one of the books by David Hawkins.
Oh, good. Which one?
It is called Discovery of the Presence of God, Devotional Non-Duality.
Yeah, and he's good at that. Okay, so I should probably take. Yeah, I think he's got about 5 books. I should introduce people to each one of those. That one, the one that you have, is particularly devotional non-duality. There's others that are more, abstract or intellectual or whatever, but that's more like bhakti yoga for Christians, right? What questions do you have about it?
Well, so one thing.
Not just Christians, any Abrahamic, Muslim, Jewish, that's fine too, if you have an open mind.
He talks about the use of prayer and how, as people develop, they go from prayer being something they like ask God for.
Gimme, as Doris Lessing says.
Mm-hmm.
They move from gimme to.
They move to like surrendering
and gratitude.
Mm.
Yeah, and that surrendering, when you think about it, when you look at the structure of the thing, what surrender means is like putting your ego, for once, letting it lie there on the floor and asking for help. And that's the active principle in AA, right? That is the thing. I mean, in addition to the others, but the first step is to surrender, which is the same thing as putting your ego, taking it off its throne and turning somewhere else. So that's powerful. That's powerful medicine in the right context, absolutely. And I think that's how Hawkins woke up. I think that's how I don't know about Tolley. He was in pretty bad shape, so his ego may have been on the ground, in the dirt anyway. So that should not be underestimated. And in the future, they may write a book about the psychological structure the transformation of the ego and the other psychological structures that are necessary for waking up.
Mm.
So good. Questions about it?
So for myself, I've noticed one of the things that,
Now talk about courage. That takes courage, by the way.
How so?
Imagine you've been an alcoholic all your life, right? You're 50 years old, and you're going to go and you've been denying alcoholism or heroin addiction or whatever else you might have been doing because you're ashamed of it and you're afraid of it and and then you have to go in front of a bunch of strangers and tell them the truth, the whole truth. That takes courage, right? For some people, most people.
Right.
So there again, courage. I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say one thing I've noticed that I spend a lot of energy on, and at least of late, and I think it's at least partially kind of wasted energy, is spending a lot of time, thinking, well, one, like putting effort in work, but two, also not just like putting effort in work, but thinking about how, I need to work hard to save up money to make sure, like, if there's a recession, I have savings, or need to be able to save enough money to, like, be safe in these different situations and stuff, and work hard to, have whatever I'm working on, I want to make sure it's successful, and that sort of thing, right?
Yes.
But then, inevitably, I have control over how hard I work and stuff, but I have no control over the outcomes. And
well, trust in God, but tie your camel, right?
Right.
You're not a monk. You're not. If you were a monk, and that's something to keep in mind when you're reading some of these texts, they were written for monks and nuns, and they didn't worry about, they were going to be taken care of by the church or by the monastery or whatever, and so that needs to be modified for the modern world of where we don't have those kinds of things to speak of anymore. So it's not an easy balance, but you are responsible for it. You don't want to be a burden on this world.
Right.
A pauper is a stranger in his own hometown, right?
What's a pauper?
Pauper? Why don't you look that up too? That's another very important word.
A very poor person.
Yeah. Someone who's destitute.
Historical. A recipient of government relief or public charity.
Well, it's someone who, now I'm not saying it's their fault, but if it is their neglect of their own adult responsibilities, that's not a good thing. It's not always avoidable, but it oftentimes is. I've seen many cases of people with, without two bits to their name, and it's just through sheer irresponsibility, or they drank it, or they gambled it, or they never made it in the first place because they didn't want to work. All beings work without exception. So I think, tell me what the question is, but I'm probably going to say that, yeah, that's a difficult struggle and judgment call.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a concrete question there, but more just kind of a just checking in on, like, what if there must be like some sort of balance there, or there might also be things that are not useful in that area.
Part of it depends on whether you're just going to be responsible for yourself, or you're going to be responsible for a wife or a husband and children or parents,
right.
And so it depends on your circumstance and what you can do too. Right now, in the West, many of us are wildly wealthy. I mean, literally, we live better than emperors did 1,000 years ago. No, I mean, not by no exaggeration. Whatever food we want, whatever we want to drink, whatever we want to watch, whatever, And so part of it is our inability to see our own wealth, which is one of the things that worries me about this UBI, or just plain UBI. I think UBI is a good idea, but we got to find a way to where we realize how wealthy we are already. Now, I'm not saying there's not room for improvement, but so now, depending on your circumstance and your situation, it may be a little, it may be a lot, It could be, I mean, if you're a bricklayer or a landscaper, you go to work every day, and maybe that's the only job you can get, or maybe that's the job you want, and and if you're being paid fairly, then you go home at night and you eat dinner, watch the game and go to bed or something. Nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, here's a saying from Christianity: to those to whom much is given, much is expected. Is that Christian? Or was that just my mother? Could you look it up? To those who much is given. So you've been given a lot, like most of us have, and so our what we give back should be commensurate with that, I think. And again, it leads to a better life. The happiest people are the ones who feel they're doing something constructive, and that can be landscaping or bricklaying or tile laying. It's from the Bible. Where in the Bible?
Luke 12:48.
All right. Could you read the passage before it and the one after it and that one?
And that servant who knew his Lord's will and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not and committed things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomever much is given, of him shall much be required, and to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more.
There, boom. That's the answer to the question right there. That's Jesus, isn't it?
Let me see. I think so.
Yeah, and parents should teach that to their kids too. That's wise stuff. Of course, you know. So again, it's not an easy question though, and there is a struggle there, and it's not an easy answer. But if you're going to generalize it all, I'd say that's the best generalization I've ever heard, which is him or her to whom much is given, much is expected.
Okay.
And we in the West have been given a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
It makes me want to cry when I think about how destructive we are in the world, needlessly destructive. Oh, humanity. All right, good. You know who else is good about this are the Sufis and obviously the Jews too, right?
How so?
Well, with the Sufis, they're you know the fact that you're a spiritual man does not obviate your responsibility to your community or to others. And there's no monkery in Islam, right? At least that's the quote that comes to mind. I think that is the Prophet Muhammad. May he rest in peace. So, and then Judaism, I was just making a generalization, you know. This world is an abode of truth for those who are truthful with it. And sometimes all you need to do is just look around and think. Again, this is where contemplation comes in.
Yeah. I have another one that's, again, not a concrete question, but kind of a topic. The other week, I was walking in the city and came upon people playing music. And the music, it was really good. They were singing and had a guy on the keyboard and a guy playing guitar, and they sounded really great. And then as we got closer, we realized it was like a pop-up worship.
Oh, really?
Christian.
A church thing?
Yeah.
Oh, good. We need more of that.
And
we need more music
and
really
dancing
nice. And singing. Like in Spain, you just walk around in Spain and it's all over the place. You know, kids play. Yeah, so go ahead. This is good.
So yeah, my immediate reaction was like, "Oh, this is great!" Like the essence of it felt beautiful and really nice. And then afterwards, they started talking about their church, and like the pastor like started praying for one of the people and with the hand on the head and stuff. And And then
evangelists,
I guess I don't know what
fundamentalists.
Yeah. So that, and then the feeling of like pure beautifulness went away, and it was just kind of a weirdness. And
Yeah, because of the bigotry that we have in the West towards religion. That's a new thing. You know, that if you live in a adequate culture, there's room for everybody. It's not evil, right? And I know because I lived through this in college and med school and science, although it's changing, and it's only recent. It's been atheistic as a religion itself, you know, just hardcore atheistic. And anybody who believed in anything religious, including God, was just an idiot, and you can't even mention that or whatever, which is really wild considering Newton and Leibniz and all these guys were very religious. I mean, the history of science is that of religious men and women until recently, maybe the last, I don't know, 150 years. So, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater and you don't have any baby. So yeah, there's that, because we've been conditioned to object to that. We object to fundamentalists the way we would to, I mean, it's just sad. It's like a mind that's too small to include the possibility that different strokes for different people.
But isn't it also like a protection mechanism, because there's like lots of cults to take advantage of people?
I don't know. The same folks wouldn't mind at all go into a Buddhist, you know, Dharma meeting or Dharma talk, and they would get up there and dance with the Hare Krishnas, who are as fundamental as anybody else, as far as I can tell, and trying to convert people. That's why they're there, and no problem with the Hare Krishnas, you know. But if you're in Harvard Yard and you were a Christian, they'd kick you out. The same place where the Hare Krishnas were doing the same thing, and just down the road, there's what's his name, selling mantras. What was his name? I don't know. Anyway, you get the point. It's bias. Well, it's ignorance and bias and closed-mindedness and lack of generosity. You see.
The Nasrudin story where he dances and gives away his donkey comes to mind.
Tell us the story. Do you know where it is?
It's like, I don't know where it is, but
I know the one where he goes and sings the call to prayer, and his voice is so bad that people pay him to not do it. Okay, what is the one where he loses his donkey?
He's traveling with his kid with a donkey, and he's like traveling all day, and he finds a place to rest at some inn or something, and there's a group, or it's a group running it, and they start chanting things and dancing in a circle, and Nasrudin joins them, and they're chanting things and repeating them over and over and over again. Nasrudin joined them, and then they whatever they're chanting, finally they change it to, "I give you my donkey, I give you my donkey." and the next morning, you know, he wakes up and the donkey's gone, and Nasrudin asks his son, what happened to the donkey? And he said, well, they took the donkey away. And he's like, why did you let them do that? And he says, well, because I tried to stop them, but I saw you saying, I give you my donkey, I give you my donkey.
So what he's doing there, Shaw, is it's very interesting, because going around in a circle and chanting, of course, is something that's done in fake Sufi cults, as well in real ones, right? But not so much the Naqsbandi, where they don't have the use for the emotionality that other, what do they call them, schools of Sufism might have. So Shaw is deliberately, I mean directly, pointing at these folks. I did it myself in Marin, God forbid. But I was instructed to go and see about these things, and I did, and it was a real clown show. I mean, some guy who didn't speak Arabic, they were going around in a circle and they were chanting, you know, these beautiful mantras, of the Sufis. It was all very emotional, and they darkened the lights, and it was, the whole thing was like designed to like increase emotionality and hysteria, frankly. Now Shaw had no use for that particularly. And so in this story, in addition to the funny part, which is them getting him to chant, take my donkey, or, he's also warning against just that. Do you see what I mean? It's interesting. I don't remember that story. Which book is that in?
Let's see.
The chanting circles, you can see them on YouTube sometimes, but they're usually just, I can't, I'm not in a position to judge them, but I do know that the Naqsbandi have a very limited role for that kind of thing. For that reason, right? In hyper-emotionality, you can do all kinds of weird things.
Right.
Like give your trust fund to, your guru.
Right.
And that kind of stuff happens all the time.
I can't find it right
now. All right.
Now,
well, maybe it'll come up.
One of those 3 core ones.
Okay, that's nice. That's a very nice story, and a warning to people who get caught up in these. But again, to judge them, you really have to know what's going on, right? And what I just said may be true for the Naqsbandi, but it's not true for Hare Krishna or for what was the other example I was going to think of? Well, and other Sufi sects, and there's Jewish, there's Jewish traditions where they go around and sing and chant like that. So you can't judge from the outside, right? So I just speak of the Naqsbandi in particular, the Naqsbandi Sufis. But good. Anything else before we stop?
Well, I guess to ask a more specific question related to that, like if these groups are kind of, is there a time where playing to the emotions like that and being like very
yeah, well, for conversion, very few things work as well, right? And for some religionists, right? And this is not particularly a religionist channel, I'm not speaking to the religionists, but I can say this: I've been to some black churches where you pretty much felt the spirit, right? People were passing out, and people were, the music was killer, as was the barbecue afterwards. But that's serving a different purpose, catharsis or something else, and people have a right, there's nothing wrong with that as far as that goes. Okay. And you can go to churches where people start speaking in tongues. So I'm not going to pass judgment on those because I'm not in a position to do that. I could say that there were some real authentic believers in that black church, and the spirit was moving mighty powerfully among them. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. Now, did it further my understanding? Maybe not particularly, but I was already an adult, and also, but I learned a lot about a culture that I didn't know about. Not that I didn't know about, that I just took my son to it, basically, and because I wanted him to see it, and I doubt he's going to forget that experience, and so he knows more about the world. And so, without judging people who we have no right to judge, we can also say that to experience these things as much as it's possible, in a limited view, even like the fake Sufis. I learned from that. I learned from this other churches, right? And you could probably learn from those musicians something about how other people see the world, and I think that's a good thing. It certainly beats the hardcore, closed-minded, bigoted atheism that a lot of American kids have grown up with in their colleges and etc. We got to outgrow that stuff. There's too many different kinds of people in the world and too many different kinds of needs. So, anything else?
I don't think so.
All right, sir. Adios. Vaya con Dios. And keep the faith, baby. That's good. Ciao.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.